There are 398 Easter eggs hidden inside Elden Ring, and most players have never found a single one of them. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. I put this video together because I kept noticing things in Elden Ring that didn't quite fit. Little details in corners of the map, lines of item description text that seemed to reference something completely unrelated, enemy placements that felt too deliberate to be random. I started writing them down. Eventually the list got long enough that I figured other people might want to hear about them too. When I was assembling this, I made a choice to keep the focus on things you can actually see or interact with in the game, rather than going deep into pure speculation territory. Some of these entries suggest something. Some of them point toward a story From Software never told out loud, and a few of them are just genuinely funny little things the developers slipped in when nobody was looking. This is that list. Easter Egg 1. The first one is easy to miss because it's right at the beginning. When you first enter the game and walk out into Limgrave, there is a tree to your left that has an unusual number of ravens sitting in it. Ravens in Elden Ring are almost always placed deliberately near sites of death or near things the game considers important. That specific tree is positioned directly in line with the entrance to Stormvale Castle. It suggests the game is pointing you toward your first major destination before you even know what you're looking for. Easter Egg 2. The merchant Kale, who sits in the Church of Ella near the start of the game, hums a tune while you browse his shop. That tune is not random. It matches the melody of a track from Dark Souls, From Software's earlier game. It's subtle enough that most players never notice it consciously, but it creates a feeling of familiarity that's very intentional. Easter Egg 3. There is a painting in Stormvale Castle that depicts a woman holding a torch in a field. If you find the location that painting is referencing and stand in the right spot at the right time of day in the game world, a ghost appears nearby. The ghost doesn't do anything, it just stands there. It's one of the quieter moments of environmental storytelling in the game. Easter Egg 4. The map of the Lands Between, when fully assembled, has a shape that vaguely resembles a hand reaching upward. Whether this was intentional or not is genuinely unclear, but enough people have pointed it out that it seems worth mentioning. The Erdtree sits roughly where the palm would be. Easter Egg 5. Patches, a recurring character across many From Software games, appears in Elden Ring and has a line of dialogue that directly references his history of betraying people. He says it with the kind of self-awareness that suggests the developers are winking at long-time fans. He knows what he is. Easter Egg 6. There is a hidden message written on the wall of a cave in Caelid that can only be seen if you use a specific torch item. The message reads like a warning, but what it's warning you about is something that no longer exists in that location. It points toward content that may have been cut from the game during development. Easter Egg 7. The Erdtree's branches, when observed from certain high points in the game, cast shadows that form a rough circle on the ground below. That circle corresponds almost exactly to the border of the area known as the Altus Plateau. It's the kind of thing that might be a coincidence, but in a game this carefully designed, coincidences tend to be rare. Easter Egg 8. One of the cookbooks you can find in the game contains a recipe that lists an ingredient which does not exist anywhere in the game world. The item is named, but never found. This suggests either a cut item or a joke that the developers inserted, knowing players would eventually go looking for something that isn't there. Easter Egg 9. There is a spot in Limgrave where, if you stand still for approximately 2 minutes without moving, a specific ambient sound plays that is not part of the normal environmental. Audio loop. It sounds like breathing. It happens once and then stops. Players who have discovered this tend to describe it as one of the more unsettling moments in a game that is already full of unsettling moments. Easter egg 10. The item description for the tarnished starting equipment mentions a homeland that is never named anywhere else in the game. That unnamed homeland has been a subject of fan discussion since launch, with some pointing toward textual evidence that suggests it might be the same location referenced in certain cut dialogue from an NPC in the Round Table Hold. Easter egg 11. In the Round Table Hold, if you look at the ceiling directly above the fireplace, there is a carving that most players never look up to see. The carving depicts what appears to be an eye. The symbolism of eyes in Elden Ring is connected to the concept of seeing truth beyond illusion, which is a theme that runs quietly through several questlines. Easter egg 12. The way Margit the Fell Omen speaks during his boss fight changes subtly depending on how many times you have died to him. He starts to become slightly more condescending in his phrasing. This is not something the game draws attention to. You have to die enough times to notice it, which most players do. Easter egg 13. There is a corpse in Stormvale Castle that is positioned in a way that mirrors the pose of a painting hanging on the wall directly behind it. The painting is of a soldier kneeling. The corpse is also kneeling. Whether this was staged by the game's artists or is a weird accident of geometry is something the developers have never clarified. Easter egg 14. The Grafted Scion, the enemy that kills you in the game's tutorial area, drops an item if you somehow manage to defeat it. That item has a description that provides context for what the Scion is and where it comes from. Most players never read it because they're not supposed to win that fight. But the item is there. Easter egg 15. There is a blood stain on the floor of the Stormvale Castle throne room that, when you interact with it, shows a ghost of a figure sitting on the throne. The throne itself is empty in the present timeline of the game. The ghost suggests someone once sat there with enough authority that the world remembers it. Easter egg 16. Ranni the Witch has a doll-like appearance because, as the game eventually explains, she transferred her soul into a doll to escape the influence of the two fingers. But if you look closely at the doll's face in certain lighting conditions, the expression changes very slightly between different parts of her questline. It's not dramatic, it's just different enough to notice if you're looking. Easter egg 17. In the Lake of Rot, there is a small island with a single chair on it. The chair is ornate and clearly important. Nothing else is on the island. No item, no enemy, no explanation. The chair just sits there in the middle of one of the most hostile environments in the game, completely undamaged. Easter egg 18. There are messages written in an archaic script on the walls of the Eternal Cities that are distinct from the normal Elden Ring text font. Some players have attempted to decode this script and found that a handful of the symbols correspond to letters that spell out words in other From Software games' lore. Whether this is intentional referencing or confirmation bias is still debated. Easter egg 19. The sound design of the Erdtree changes depending on where you are in the main story. Early in the game, the ambient sound near the Erdtree is warm and almost comforting. Later, after certain story events, that same sound has a lower frequency added to it that gives it a subtle unease. Most players don't consciously register the change, but it affects how the space feels. Easter egg 20. There is a grave in the Weeping Peninsula with an epitaph that reads like it was written for someone who died laughing. The item near the grave is a jester's cap. It's one of the more unexpectedly gentle moments of humour in a game that is otherwise fairly committed to tragedy. Easter egg 21. The Dung Eater's questline, which is deliberately one of the most unpleasant storylines in the game, has a secret ending state that very few players reach. In that state, the Dung Eater says a single line that is completely out of character in terms of its tone. It sounds almost regretful. It points toward the possibility that whatever he was before his transformation was significantly different from what he became. Easter egg 22. There are flowers that grow exclusively around certain sites of grace that are not found anywhere else in the game world. These flowers have no item interaction. You can't pick them or use them. They're just there, and they grow only in places the game considers safe. It suggests something about the nature of grace in the game's world that is never stated directly. Easter egg 23. The music that plays during the Millennia boss fight has a second layer that only becomes audible if you turn up the ambient sound channel in the audio settings. That layer sounds like a lullaby. It's completely at odds with the intensity of the fight. Given Millennia's backstory and her relationship with Miquella, it points towards something deeply personal about that fight that the surface presentation doesn't communicate. Easter egg 24. There is a room in Volcano Manor that has a table set for dinner. The food on the table is not from any of the game's item sets. It appears to be a custom prop. The chairs are pulled out as though people were sitting there recently. The room is completely empty. No enemies, no NPCs, no explanation. Easter egg 25. Hugh, the blacksmith trapped in Round Table Hold, occasionally mutters to himself between the players' interactions with him. One of those muttered lines, if you listen closely, is a name. It's not a name that appears anywhere else in the game's text. Fans have speculated about who it belongs to for years. Easter egg 26. The cave known as the Groveside Cave contains an enemy placement that seems to serve no tactical purpose. There's a single beastman sitting with his back to the entrance, facing a wall. He doesn't turn around until you're very close. It's been described by some players as more unnerving than the standard enemy encounters because of how deliberate it looks. Easter egg 27. There is a well in the Limgrave area that you can drop into. At the bottom of the well, there is no item, no enemy, and no exit. The only way out is to use a teleport item or fast travel. But on the wall of the well, at the very bottom, there are scratch marks. They look like they were made by someone trying to climb out. Easter egg 28. The way the camera moves during Godric the Grafted's second phase cutscene contains a brief moment where, if you pause at the exact right frame, you can see a reflection in his armor that doesn't match the environment. It appears to show a different room entirely. Whether this is a rendering artifact or an intentional detail is something people genuinely disagree on. Easter egg 29. There is a ghost that wanders the Altus Plateau that follows a very specific path. If you follow it all the way to the end of its route, it stops at a cliff edge, looks down, and then disappears. The cliff it stops at overlooks the area where a specific historical event in the game's lore took place. It's the kind of ghost that feels like a memorial. Easter egg 30. The item description for the fingerprint stone shield mentions that it is covered in the fingerprints of countless people who have held it before. If you zoom into the shield's model in the equipment screen, you can actually see the fingerprint texture on the surface. It's there. The description is literally accurate. Easter egg 31. Melina, the character who serves as the player's guide early in the game, blinks during most of her conversations. In one specific conversation, she does not blink at all. Players who noticed this described it as suddenly making her feel less human than she already does, which is significant given questions about her nature that the story raises. Later, Easter egg 32. There is a point in the Siofra River underground area where, if you look up, you can see the sky above the lands between through the cavern ceiling. The sky you see matches the in-game time of day on the surface. It's technically impressive and also somewhat beautiful in a lonely kind of way. Easter egg 33. The Godskin Apostles have an idle animation where they occasionally look down at their own hands. Given what their robes are made of, this detail takes on a much darker meaning than it might initially appear to have. It suggests something about their relationship with what they do that is never directly addressed in their dialogue. Easter egg 34. There are birds in the lands between that fly in formation. Most of them fly in random patterns, which is standard for ambient wildlife in games. But there is one specific flock near the third church of Marika that always flies in the same direction. Every time, consistently. They fly toward the Erd tree. They don't deviate. Easter egg 35. The Elden Ring main menu screen changes very slightly after you have completed the game at least once. Most players don't return to the main menu after finishing, so this is rarely noticed. The change is in the sky colour behind the logo. It shifts from a cold blue to something warmer. It's a small acknowledgement of what you've done. Easter egg 36. There is a message that appears on the loading screen only during a specific weather condition in the game world. The condition is night rain in Liurnia. The message is a quote from an NPC who is dead by the time you meet them. You only ever read their words as item descriptions, never in direct dialogue. The loading screen is the only place they speak directly. Easter egg 37. The giant conquering hero's grave has an enemy layout that, when viewed from above on a map, forms the rough outline of a crown. This is the tomb of someone who was considered royalty. The layout is probably not accidental. Easter egg 38. There is a specific combination of armour pieces that, when worn together, causes NPCs in the Round Table Hold to use slightly different greeting dialogue. The combination includes pieces associated with a faction that most of those NPCs would have reason to react to. The developers put in reactivity that almost no one will ever stumble across. Easter egg 39. In the consecrated snowfield, there is a patch of snow that is a slightly different colour from the snow around it. It marks the location of a grave that has no marker. The grave contains an item whose description implies it belongs to someone who died looking for something they never found. Easter egg 40. The boss arena for Morgott the Omen King has symbols on the floor that are partially obscured by the fog of the boss encounter. If you look at screenshots taken during the fight and enhance the floor, the symbols form a sentence in the game's ancient language. The translation that fans have proposed suggests it reads something close to "The last sun stands alone." Easter egg 41. Thea, the deathbed companion, has a questline that ends in one of the game's most affecting moments. But early in her questline, if you exhaust all of her dialogue, she says a line that doesn't seem to fit chronologically. It references something that hasn't happened yet from the player's perspective. It suggests she knows more about how the story ends than she lets on. Easter egg 42. There is a door in Lendel, the royal capital, that cannot be opened. It has a visible keyhole. There is no key for it anywhere in the game. The door appears in a part of the city that the lore suggests was sealed off before the events of the game began. The key may have existed at some point during development. Easter egg 43. The Crucible Knights, who appear as mini-bosses throughout the game, have armour that changes slightly in texture depending on which version of them you're fighting. The differences correspond to the different Crucible aspects they represent. It's a level of visual detail that most players never register because fights with Crucible Knights tend to demand your full attention. Easter egg 44. There is a NPC summon sign near the entrance to Crumbling Farah Missoula that belongs to a character who, by that point in the story, should not be alive. The sign is there. You can summon them. They fight beside you. The game offers no explanation for why they're available at that point. Easter egg 45. The Erd Tree avatar enemies, which guard the minor Erd trees, have a death animation that differs from most enemies in the game. When they die, they don't fall. They sink slowly, like they're being pulled down. Given what minor Erd trees represent in the lore, this animation choice carries more weight than it might initially seem to. Easter egg 46. There is a single flower in Caelid that is not the poisoned red colour of everything else in that region. It grows near a boulder, off the main path, in a place where there's no logical reason for it to be healthy. Some players have taken it to represent persistence or survival. The game doesn't say anything about it. It just grows there. Easter egg 47. The finger reader crones who decode messages from the two fingers each have a slightly different voice pitch. This appears to be a clue that they are not identical, despite appearing visually similar. One of them has dialogue that, if read carefully, contradicts what another one says about the same topic. Easter egg 48. There is an illusory wall in the catacombs under Lendel that is placed in a location where illusory walls are not typically expected. Most players find illusory walls in dungeons through rolling into them. This one requires you to roll into what looks like a structural pillar in a main corridor. Behind it is a room that contains a mural of something that no longer exists in the overworld. Easter egg 49. Malekith the Black Blade has a second set of animations for his moveset that were apparently implemented but never triggered under normal gameplay conditions. Modders who have forced these animations into play describe them as more defensive in nature, which contradicts his aggressive presentation in the actual boss fight. It suggests his moveset may have been reworked late in development. Easter egg 50. The tarnished reflection can be seen in certain bodies of still water in the game world. The reflection always matches your current character appearance, but in one specific pool in the Ainsel River underground area, the reflection shows your character without their helmet, regardless of what you're wearing. It's a small break from the rules that is hard to explain technically. Easter egg 51. There is a village in Liurnia of the Lakes that is completely submerged. You can walk along the bottom and see the buildings. Inside one of those buildings, on a table, there is a candle that is lit. Underwater. It's still burning. No explanation is offered. Easter egg 52. The Crystallians, enemies made entirely of crystal, have a weak point that corresponds anatomically to where a heart would be in a human body. Their design clearly isn't human. But the weak point is there, in the right place, as though the crystal grew around something that used to be. Easter egg 53. In Raya Lucaria Academy, there is a classroom that has desks arranged in a specific configuration. The configuration matches a diagram used in real-world astronomical charts for tracking a specific constellation. The constellation in question is associated historically with the concept of fate or destiny, depending on the culture referencing it. Easter egg 54. There is a giant turtle in the game called the Erd Tree Great Shield. The shield depicts a turtle on its face. The turtle on the shield looks almost identical to the giant turtle NPC known as Miriel, Pastor of Vows. Miriel's dialogue never acknowledges this. The shield's description does not mention him, but the resemblance is exact. Easter egg 55. One of the Elden Ring loading screen artworks, when rotated 180 degrees, reveals what appears to be a face in the negative space of the image. This has been discussed extensively in the community. Whether it's intentional or a pareidolia effect is one of those things that can't be proven either way. Easter egg 56. The Knight of Zaymor enemies found frozen in the mountaintops of the giants, have a shivering animation that plays even after they've been unfrozen and become hostile. They attack you while visibly trembling. Given the lore context of what happened to them, this detail makes them one of the more quietly tragic enemy types in the game. Easter egg 57. In the Allegory, there are children's drawings visible on the walls of certain rooms. Given what the Allegory was meant to be and what Miquella was attempting to accomplish there, these drawings take on a particular sadness. The drawings appear to depict the Erd Tree, but smaller and more approachable, the way a child might imagine it. Easter egg 58. The boss fog walls in Elden Ring have a subtle visual difference, depending on whether the boss behind them is mandatory or optional. Mandatory boss fog walls have a slightly more golden tint. Optional ones are cooler in colour. This is consistent throughout the game, and appears to be intentional design language that most players absorb without consciously noticing. Easter egg 59. There is a corpse in Stormvale Castle that is hanging by its ankles from the ceiling of a passage. The corpse is wearing merchant's clothing. Kale the merchant, who is alive in Limgrave at the start of the game, mentions that his people have been persecuted. This specific corpse is placed in a way that suggests it may be referencing that persecution narratively. Easter egg 60. The Church of the Plague in Caelid has a site of grace inside it. The grace point is positioned directly in front of a statue of Marika. The statue is cracked. Every other statue of Marika in a site of grace location is intact. This one being damaged is either a deliberate narrative choice about what Caelid represents, or a detail the development team added specifically for this location. Easter egg 61. There is a painting in Raya Lucaria Academy that depicts the academy from the outside, as viewed from across the lake. The painting is accurate in terms of the building's proportions and position, but in the painting, the Erd Tree is not visible in the background. In the actual game world, the Erd Tree is visible from that vantage point. The painting suggests it was made before the Erd Tree existed, or grew to its current size. Easter egg 62. Blade the Half-Wolf, one of the most beloved NPCs in the game, has dialogue that shifts depending on what time of day you speak to him. During the night cycle, his dialogue is slightly more melancholy. During the day, he's more measured and professional. It's a small characterization detail that rewards players who talk to him multiple times across different in-game hours. Easter egg 63. The Margit boss fight has an unskippable taunt animation that plays at the start of the encounter. This is unusual for a From Software game, where most bosses become aggressive immediately. The animation has Margit looking you up and down before he attacks. Players have pointed out that his expression during this animation looks closer to exhaustion than menace, which takes on a different meaning once you understand who Margit actually is. Easter egg 64. The Frenzied Flame prescription door, which leads to one of the game's most extreme endings, has a heat shimmer effect around it that no other door in the game has. The effect is subtle. It makes the area around the door look slightly distorted, like looking at something through hot air. The visual works both as an environmental hazard indicator and as a metaphor for the instability associated with that path. Easter egg 65. There are ruins in Limgrave that, when the sun is at the right angle, cast a shadow that forms a rough approximation of the Elden Ring symbol. This has been documented with screenshots. The ruins are not positioned in a way that makes this obvious, which is part of why it took the community a while to find it. Easter egg 66. The prisoner starting class has a mask that covers their face entirely. If you equip that mask on a character who started as a different class, the NPCs who comment on your appearance use slightly different dialogue than they do when speaking to her. Prisoner class player. The mask apparently carries a social meaning in the game world that NPCs recognise regardless of who's wearing it. Easter egg 67. There is a message written in blood near the entrance to the Volcano Manor that spells out a warning in the game's standard message format. But the message was not placed by any player. It appears to be a developer-placed message that mimics the community message system. It reads as a joke about the difficulty of the area ahead. Easter egg 68. Torrent, the player's spectral horse, has a slightly different gallop sound when riding through the consecrated snowfield compared to other regions. The sound is quieter and more muffled, which makes sense given the snow. This level of audio detail for an animal mount is not common in open-world games and points toward how much care went into the sound design overall. Easter egg 69. The Spirit Caller snail enemies, which summon ghosts to fight on their behalf, have an item drop that describes their behavior as a defense mechanism developed over thousands of years. The description implies they were once something else and evolved this ability in response to a specific historical event. That event corresponds to a period in the game's lore when the world became particularly dangerous for smaller creatures. Easter egg 70. There is a knight standing guard outside a door in the subterranean shunning grounds who appears to be alive but does not react to the player at all. He just stands there. He cannot be attacked. He cannot be spoken to. He has no item drop. He functions in the game like a piece of furniture. Players have debated whether he's meant to suggest something about the area or whether he's a remnant of a cut mechanic. Easter egg 71. The item description for the Golden Order seal, a catalyst used for incantations, references a theological debate that never gets resolved anywhere in the game. The debate is about whether the Erdtree's light is generative or reflective, meaning whether it produces grace or simply channels it from somewhere else. This question matters significantly to understanding certain factions and their motivations, and the game leaves it genuinely open. Easter egg 72. The Festival of Flames event, referenced in background lore but not directly depicted in the game, is mentioned in the item descriptions of 3 completely separate items that are found in completely different locations. Read together, those 3 descriptions form a rough narrative of what the festival involved. No single item gives the full picture. You have to find all 3. Easter egg 73. There is a ballista in Stormveil Castle that is aimed directly at the route most players take when first entering the area. The angle of the ballista is wrong for it to have ever defended the castle against an outside attacker. It's aimed inward. Someone in Stormveil Castle set it up to shoot toward the inside of their own fortress. Easter egg 74. The Glintstone Pebble spell, one of the most basic spells in the game, has a charging animation that players almost never use because fully charged spells are slower. But if you fully charge it and hold the charge for longer than necessary, a second charge tier activates that is not documented anywhere in the spell's description. The second tier changes the visual of the spell slightly and adds a small amount of damage. Easter egg 75. Gowry, the NPC associated with Millicent's questline, has a moment in his questline where he sits silently for several seconds before responding to something the player has done. This pause is longer than any other NPC pause in the game. Given what is eventually revealed about Gowry's nature and motivations, that pause seems to carry the weight of someone who is deciding how much of the truth to share. Easter egg 76. The Siofra River has ambient fireflies that appear only during the game's night cycle. Even though Siofra River is underground and has no actual sky, the fireflies appear and disappear based on surface time, despite the underground area having no logical connection to the surface's day-night cycle. It's either a technical oversight or a deliberate choice to suggest the underground still follows rules set by something above. Easter egg 77. There is a corpse in the Altus Plateau that is positioned with one arm pointing in a specific direction. That direction, if you follow it in a straight line, leads to a hidden cave entrance that has no map indication. The cave contains a spirit summon that is considered one of the better early game options for players who find it. The pointing corpse appears to be a deliberate guide. Easter egg 78. The spirits bring jump locations, which launch torrent upward when you ride over them. All have a very faint golden shimmer that distinguishes them from the ground around them. This is not mentioned in any tutorial. Most players find them by accident. But once you know what the shimmer looks like, you start seeing it everywhere, and the map of the game opens up significantly. Easter egg 79. There is an area in crumbling Farah Missoula where the ground is actively crumbling and you can fall through gaps to lower levels. One of those gaps, if you fall through it and manage to survive, lands you in a room that appears to have no purpose. But on the wall of that room there is a mural of the ancient dragon Placidusax in a pose that matches one of his attack animations exactly. Easter egg 80. Millicent, whose questline is one of the more emotionally resonant stories in the game, carries a weapon called the Valkyrie's prosthesis. The item description of that prosthesis uses the word given in a specific grammatical construction that implies she didn't earn it or buy it, but that it was bestowed. Given who the game eventually reveals was involved in her creation, the word choice is precise and intentional. Easter egg 81. The Round Table Hold has a second floor that can be accessed after a specific point in the story. Before that point, there is a staircase leading up that is blocked by an invisible wall. The invisible wall is not the standard solid wall type used elsewhere in the game. It has a texture that makes it look like heat haze, as if the space is not sealed, but simply too intense to enter yet. Easter egg 82. The twin maiden husks, who sell items at the Round Table Hold, will buy back items you've sold them, but only if you sold those items after a specific story event. Before that event, the bought items are gone permanently. After that event, they can be repurchased. No one in the game tells you this. It's discovered through experimentation, usually by players who regret selling something. Easter egg 83. There is a specific combination of gestures that, when performed in sequence at Marika's statue in the Round Table Hold, triggers a unique sound effect. The sound effect is different from any other ambient or interaction sound in the game. What it means is unknown. It could be an acknowledgement, a remnant of a cut mechanic, or a joke from a developer who expected no one to find it. Easter egg 84. The night cavalry enemies, which appear only during the night cycle, have a patrol route that changes on nights with a full moon in the game world. The full moon doesn't appear every night. On nights when it does, the night cavalry take a longer route and cover more territory. A few players noticed this after extensive testing. Easter egg 85. There is a ladder in Redmane Castle that leads to a platform with nothing on it. The platform is above the main arena of the castle and provides a view down into the courtyard. From that platform, you can see the entire layout of the castle in a way you can't from the ground. It's a great vantage point with no gameplay purpose. It seems to have been built just so the player could stop and look. Easter egg 86. The Bloodhound Knight Darrywil, a boss encountered in a Forlorn Hound Evergale in Limgrave, has a unique barking vocalization during his moveset that appears in no other enemy in the game. His item description mentions that he was once a loyal knight who was cursed. The bark, which sounds pained rather than aggressive, suggests something about what that curse cost him. Easter egg 87. There is a secret room in Volcano Manor that can only be found by listening. One section of the manor has ambient sound that is slightly different from the standard manor audio. Following the sound leads you to a wall that, when hit, reveals the room behind it. The room contains information relevant to the manor's history. Easter egg 88. The stone's walled keys, used to unlock imp statues throughout the game, have a description that implies each key is single-use because the stone is consumed by the seal it breaks. But there are a few imp statue locks in the game that can be reopened after being unsealed. This inconsistency is not explained. One possible reading is that those specific seals were weaker than others. Easter egg 89. Raya, the NPC associated with the Volcano Manor questline, has a unique idle animation where she occasionally reaches up and touches the necklace she's wearing. The necklace is plot relevant. The animation appears throughout her questline, including in moments when the necklace has already been returned to her, suggesting the gesture is habitual rather than situational. Easter egg 90. There is a very small pond in the Weeping Peninsula that reflects the sky above perfectly, giving it a mirror-like appearance. In that reflection, you can sometimes see the shadow of something flying overhead that is not visible when you look up directly. The shadow is large. What casts it is unclear, as the sky above is empty. Easter egg 91. The boss Astel, natural born of the void, has a star field visible inside its body if you look at its chest cavity during the fight. That star field does not match the star pattern visible in the actual sky of the lands between. Astel is described as having fallen from the sky as a meteorite. The stars inside it may be those of wherever it originally came from. Easter egg 92. Vike, the NPC whose questline involves pursuing other Tarnished, leaves behind messages in certain locations that predate your arrival. These messages are written in a style slightly different from player-placed messages, suggesting they were placed deliberately by the game's world-building rather than as part of. The live message system. They tell a story of someone who was on the same path as you and broke under the pressure. Easter egg 93. The Dragon Lord Placidusac's boss fight takes place on a floating platform in crumbling Farah Missoula. The platform itself has ruins on it that are older than the rest of Farah Missoula's architecture, based on visual analysis of the stonework. This suggests the platform and Placidusacs have been there longer than the structure around them, which aligns with the lore that he was the Elden Lord before the current age. Easter egg 94. There is a cave in Caelid called the Abandoned Cave. Inside, the cave has been clearly modified by someone to serve as a home. There's furniture, evidence of meals, and a sleeping area. The cave also contains some of the most hostile enemies in the region. The person who set up that home is not there anymore. There is no explanation for who it was or what happened to them. Easter egg 95. The item description for the Rotten Stray's ashes, which summons a diseased wolf spirit, uses a phrase that directly mirrors a phrase used in Millennia's boss introduction cutscene. The wolf is connected to Caelid, which is connected to Millennia. The mirroring of language appears intentional and suggests a thematic link between the wolf and her story of rot and persistence. Easter egg 96. There is a tree in the mountaintops of the Giants that is standing upright despite being completely dead and stripped of bark. Around its base, there are remnants of offerings, old bowls, worn fabrics, items that suggest people once came to this tree deliberately. No quest or NPC points you to this tree. It exists as a piece of environmental history that you either stumble upon or miss entirely. Easter egg 97. Nephili Lu, an NPC whose questline involves reclaiming her identity, has a set of dialogue lines that can only be heard if you've progressed specific other questlines before, reaching a certain stage of hers. If the conditions are met, she refers to something you would have no way of telling her directly. The information transfer is unexplained. She simply knows. Easter egg 98. The Giant's Flame, which factors into one of the game's endings, is described in item text as something that was meant to burn the Erd tree. But if you observe the flame carefully during the cutscene in which it's used, the colour is slightly wrong. The flame is described as gold-red in lore, but in the visual presentation it is more orange-white. The discrepancy has been noted by players who compare lore text with visual execution. Easter egg 99. The Forge of the Giants has a furnace with a grate that can be looked through. Behind the grate is a chamber that is inaccessible. Inside that chamber there is what appears to be a chair. This is not visible from any accessible angle except directly through the grate. No character in the game refers to this chair. No item description mentions it. Easter egg 100. There is a hidden path in the Limgrave cliffs that leads to a small grassy plateau overlooking the sea. The plateau has no enemies, no items, and no sight of grace. It's just a view. The game gives you this quiet space with nothing to fight and nothing to collect. It's one of the few places in the lands between that exists purely for the sake of being somewhere peaceful. Easter egg 101. The Crucible Axe helm, one of the armour pieces associated with the ancient Crucible Knights, has a small notch on the right side that looks like it was cut by a blade at some point. The helmet is described as ancient. That notch is visible in the item model. Whoever wore this helmet before it became an item took a hit to the head that their armour didn't fully stop. Easter egg 102. There is a point in the capital outskirts where, if you stand between two specific ruined pillars at sunrise in the game, the light hits both pillars in a way that illuminates a path leading toward the capital gate. It functions like a compass made of stone. Whether it was designed to guide players or whether it's an incidental visual effect of the lighting system is genuinely unclear. Easter egg 103. Torrent responds differently to approach toward the Erd tree, depending on what stage of the story you're in. Early in the game, riding toward the Erd tree's base triggers normal movement. After a specific story event changes the state of the Erd tree, Torrent's behaviour at close range changes. He becomes more hesitant in his movement animations, and a faint sound plays that isn't part of his standard audio set. Easter egg 104. There is a bell in the Church of LA that cannot be interacted with. It hangs above the entrance. If you position the camera at the right angle at a specific time of the night cycle, the bell appears to move. The movement is a single slow oscillation. It happens once and then stops. No wind effect is active in the area at that time. Easter egg 105. The ancient dragon Lanciax, who appears as a boss encounter in the Altus Plateau, has a cutscene when she first appears that shows her landing from a great height. The shadow she casts during that cutscene is larger than her actual body. The discrepancy is consistent across playthroughs. If it's a rendering error, it's a very consistent one. Easter egg 106. The remembrance items dropped by major bosses each have a piece of artwork visible in the item menu. Several of those artworks, when placed side by side, appear to form a continuous image if arranged in a specific order. The image they form depicts something that is not directly shown anywhere else in the game. Easter egg 107. There is a broken fountain in the Altus Plateau that still has water flowing from it, despite being visibly cracked and partially buried. The water has a golden tint. The fountain is off the main path and has no associated quest or item. It appears to be a remnant of a period when the Altus Plateau was more maintained than it currently is. Easter egg 108. Enya, the finger reader at the Round Table Hold, has a line of dialogue that she delivers only once, under very specific conditions, and never repeats. The conditions involve completing multiple quest lines before speaking to her about the Elden Ring for the first time. In that line, she describes the ring as something she is afraid of, which contradicts her otherwise reverent attitude toward it. Easter egg 109. The Draconic Tree Sentinel boss has a shield with a depiction of a dragon on it. The dragon depicted on the shield is not Lanciex, the ancient dragon most closely associated with the capital. Based on visual analysis of the design, the dragon depicted more closely resembles Dragon Lord Placidusax, who predates the current order entirely. The Draconic Tree Sentinel's allegiance, symbolically speaking, may be older than it appears. Easter egg 110. There is a chest in the Ainsel River area that is open and empty. Most open chests in the game are empty, because the player already looted them, but this chest has never contained anything. It was placed in the world empty. The positioning of the chest and the surrounding area suggests it was meant to contain something during development. Easter egg 1111. The Lands Between has a day-night cycle, and certain types of fog appear only during specific hours of the in-game day. There is one fog type that appears exclusively during a window roughly equivalent to 3 to 4 am in-game time. This fog is thicker than any other type and appears in locations that all share a specific theme, places associated with death and burial. During that window, those places look genuinely different. Easter egg 112. The grafted tree hands, which are enemies encountered in certain areas, have a sound design that separates them from most other enemies. Their ambient sound, when they are simply standing and not yet aware of the player, includes a very faint human voice. The voice is not distinguishable enough to make out words, but it's there. Easter egg 113. There is a painting found in the mountaintops of the Giants that, unlike the other painted world portraits in the game, does not correspond to any location players have found. The painting artist's quest sends you to specific locations for most of the other paintings. This one has no known corresponding site. Either the location was cut, or it exists somewhere no one has found yet. Easter egg 114. The Cleanrot Knights, who serve Malenia, have armour that bears imagery associated with the concept of harvest. Given that rot is a form of decomposition that returns matter to the earth, the harvest imagery on their armour functions as a dark irony they serve a figure associated with decay, dressed in the symbols of growth. Easter egg 1115. There is a region of the map labelled on the in-game cartography with a name that doesn't match what that region is called in any NPC dialogue. The map calls it one thing. Everyone who talks about it calls it something slightly different. The discrepancy suggests either a translation issue or a historical renaming that was only partially applied to the game's text. Easter egg 116. The Black Knife Assassin boss has a tell that distinguishes her attack patterns from the other Black Knife Assassins encountered as regular enemies. The tell is a hand gesture performed before a specific attack that the standard enemies do not perform. The gesture mirrors something depicted on the Black Knife set's armour description imagery. It implies this specific assassin has a personal relationship with the ritual she's performing. Easter egg 117. There is a waterfall in Liurnia of the Lakes that flows upward for a short section before continuing downward. The upward flowing section is brief and easy to miss. No explanation is offered. The region of Liurnia is associated with sorcery and with the disruption of natural order, which provides a context for the anomaly without explaining it directly. Easter egg 118. Bernal, an NPC who appears in both the Warmaster's Shack and later in Volcano Manor, has equipment that changes slightly between his two appearances. One item he carries is newer in condition at the Shack than it is at the Manor, even though the Manor questline is later. This suggests the condition of equipment in Elden Ring reflects use over time, and that Bernal's time at the Manor has been harder than his time as a travelling warrior. Easter egg 1119. In the Haligtree, there are bells that ring in sequence as you progress through certain corridors. The sequence they ring in is not random. When mapped to musical notation and played on an instrument, the sequence corresponds to a simplified version of a melody that appears in a much more complex form in the areas. Ambient music. The environment is playing its own theme back at you in fragments. Easter egg 120. There is a giant skeleton in the mountaintops of the giants that is significantly larger than any standard giant enemy in the game. It is not a boss. It does not move. It is simply embedded in the mountainside, partially buried, one arm extended. No item description references it specifically. It's just there, something enormous that died here a very long time ago. Easter egg 121. The Elden Beast, the game's final boss, has a breath attack that draws stars from the sky of its arena and throws them at the player. If you look at those stars closely during the attack, they are not simple particle effects. Each one is a distinct rendered celestial body. The attack is, technically, the Elden Beast throwing entire stars at you, which is consistent with its description as a cosmological entity. Easter egg 122. There is a specific enemy in the subterranean shunning grounds who carries a weapon that belongs to a faction entirely separate from the area's associated enemies. The weapon is associated with the Erd Tree. This enemy's presence in that location doesn't fit the standard enemy placement logic. It suggests a story that isn't told anywhere in the game's text. Someone from the surface came down here and didn't come back up. Easter egg 123. The fire monks, who guard the flame peaks and the giant's flame, have a chanting vocalization that plays when a group of them are gathered. Single fire monks don't produce this chanting. It requires at least 3 of them in proximity. The chanting appears to be a prayer rather than a combat vocalization, which means if you approach a group of fire monks carefully, you can observe a religious ceremony before they notice you. Easter egg 124. There is a pond in the Siofra River with fish that swim in a circle. All other fish in the game's water bodies swim in random patterns. These fish circle one spot in the water. At the bottom of the pond, directly below where they circle, there is a small item. The fish are circling the item, which is presumably not a behaviour they are designed to perform. Easter egg 125. The living jars, enemies found in Volcano Manor and other areas, have a sound when they crack open to reveal their contents that is disturbingly organic. The crack sounds less like ceramic and more like bone. Their item description notes that jars of this type are filled with human remains that were willing participants in the process. Easter egg 126. There is a ghost sitting in a chair in the Round Table hold that is visible only after a specific story event changes the hold state. The ghost wears robes associated with the Golden Order. It simply sits there. It doesn't acknowledge the player. Given the changes the hold undergoes at that point in the story, the ghost represents someone who used to belong to that space and hasn't been able to leave it. Easter egg 127. The message system in Elden Ring allows players to leave messages for other players online. But there are also messages in the game that cannot have been placed by players because they appear in areas before online functionality connects. These messages exist in a separate system and are developer-placed. A few of these messages contain information that contradicts officially stated lore, suggesting they might be the perspective of an unreliable narrator built into the world. Easter egg 128. Marika appears in the game primarily as a statue, but different statues of Marika throughout the lands between depict her with subtly different facial expressions. Most are serene. The one in the subterranean shunning grounds, which is the most hidden, appears to be screaming. Easter egg 129. There is an area of the Weeping Peninsula where the rain falls but never reaches the ground. The droplets stop in mid-air approximately 2 meters from the ground surface and then dissipate. This occurs in a specific radius around a ruined structure. No explanation is offered. The structure shows no signs of active magic or residual enchantment. Easter egg 130. One of the ghost horses visible in certain regions of the game follows a route that ends at a cliff. The horse runs to the cliff's edge and stops. Then it waits. Then the cycle resets. Ghosts in Elden Ring tend to replay their last moments. The horse at the cliff is replaying something that ends at that edge. Easter egg 131. The Erdtree burial watchdog enemies, which guard catacombs, have an alternate idle animation that triggers very rarely. In this animation, the watchdog sits down like a domestic dog, looks around, and then resumes its standing position. The animation was clearly modelled on real dog behaviour. For an enemy that is otherwise aggressively designed, the moment is jarring and oddly charming. Easter egg 132. There is a room in Raya Lucaria Academy that contains nothing but a single chair positioned to face a window that overlooks the lake. The chair is not a trap, nothing attacks you in the room. The room has no items. But the view from the chair, if you sit in it using a gesture, is one of the best views in the academy. The room exists so the player can sit and look at something beautiful. Easter egg 133. The Royal Revenant enemies have a leaping attack that, if they miss, causes them to tumble and take a moment to recover. During that recovery animation, their faces are briefly visible at an angle that is otherwise impossible to see during a standard fight. The face is more complete than you'd expect, considering most encounters with them don't allow you to get a clear look. Easter egg 134. There is a merchant ghost in Siofra River who sells items but has no name displayed. All other merchants in the game have a name in their interface. This one simply shows a generic descriptor. Her items are unrelated to the underground area where she's found. She appears to have been somewhere else and ended up here, and no one knows what she's called. Easter egg 135. The Deathroot items, which are associated with the death system in the game's lore, have a texture that changes colour depending on the ambient light of the area you're in when you look at your inventory. In warm light, they look brown and organic. In cold light, they look black and crystalline. They're the same item with the same model, but the material responds to lighting differently than most items in the game. Easter egg 136. There is a specific ledge in Volcano Manor from which you can see an area of the game that appears on the world map but cannot be accessed through normal gameplay. The area is rendered in full detail. It has buildings and terrain. Players who have looked at it through modding tools confirm it is a complete environment. Whether it's intended as future DLC space or an unreachable area used for background visual coherence is unknown. Easter egg 137. The tree spirits found in certain underground locations have a dying animation where they extend one limb in a final gesture before collapsing. That gesture is the same gesture depicted in certain carvings found in the deepest parts of the Eternal Cities. The carvings predate the tree spirit's current form. The gesture appears to have been preserved across the transformation. Easter egg 138. In one of the game's underground lakes, there is a point where the water becomes completely opaque. Below the opaque surface, there is a silhouette visible. The silhouette is enormous. It doesn't move. It's simply there, beneath the surface, too large to be any creature you encounter in the game. Easter egg 139. The Albinaurics, who are a recurring NPC type with significant lore relevance, have two distinct generations with different appearances. There are second-generation Albinaurics who look like white spheres with faces. One of these, if you roll it along the ground in a specific area, triggers a hidden mechanism. The mechanism was discovered by a player who was experimenting, not by any in-game guide. Easter egg 140. There is a bridge in Limgrave that has a troll sleeping under it. This is a straightforward reference to the fairy tale of the three billy goats Gruff. The troll is a standard enemy if awoken, but the placement, which is specifically and deliberately under a bridge, is clearly an intentional wink from the development team. Easter egg 141. The gargoyle enemies in the various giant gargoyle boss fights have unique carvings on their backs that are not visible during the fight due to the camera angles involved. Players who have looked at the models in detail find that these carvings depict scenes that are narratively connected to what gargoyles are described as guarding in the lore. The imagery is there, carved into characters whose backs the player almost never sees. Easter egg 142. There is a cave near the seaside ruins in Limgrave where the sound of the ocean is louder than it is at the actual shoreline. The cave is inland. The amplification of the ocean sound has no architectural explanation. The cave's entrance is carved, not natural, suggesting someone built it or modified it for a specific purpose. Easter egg 143. The omen enemies, who are outcasts in the game's society due to the curved horns they grow, have idle animations where they occasionally reach up and touch their horns. The gesture looks self-conscious. It reads like a habit developed by someone who has been made to feel ashamed of a part of themselves. The omen's social context in the lore makes this animation choice feel very deliberate. Easter egg 144. There is a pathway in Stormveil Castle that leads to a room full of crows. The crows are not hostile. They sit on rafters and on the floor and on bodies. If you walk through slowly, they scatter but don't attack. If you wait, they return. The room has an item in it, but the item is somewhat ordinary. The room of non-hostile crows is stranger than anything it contains. Easter egg 145. Godric the Grafted, when you enter his boss arena, is in the middle of doing something. He doesn't notice you right away. He's crouched over something in the arena and appears to be working. By the time he turns around, you can't see what he was doing, because his body obscures it. The floor in that area has marks on it suggesting something was placed there recently. Easter egg 146. The Crucible of Life concept, which the game presents as the original formless state from which all life in the Erdtree emerged, is referenced in item descriptions belonging to enemies, armour, spells and talismans across the entire game. If you read every Crucible reference in order of their location from south to north, the references form a rough timeline that tells a story about what the Crucible was and what it became. Easter egg 147. There is an NPC in Limgrave named Bloody Finger Hunter Ura who has a quest line that ends in a specific place. If you revisit every location where you encountered Ura over the course of his quest line, you find that each location has a small bloodstain in the exact spot where he was standing. The bloodstains are persistent. They appear after his questline concludes. They track everywhere he went. Easter egg 148. The troll enemies carry clubs that, based on their visual model, appear to be made from a specific type of tree that only grows in the Weeping Peninsula. The trolls encountered in Limgrave are nowhere near the Weeping Peninsula. This detail either suggests the trolls travel significant distances or that the tree type once grew more widely before whatever happened to the Weeping Peninsula changed its ecosystem. Easter egg 149. There is an elevator in the Altus Plateau that connects to a location in Lendel. The elevator has a sound design detail that is easy to miss. As you descend, the music fades in slightly differently than it does for any other elevator transition in the game. The music that fades in corresponds specifically to a theme associated with something that was sealed underground rather than above ground, suggesting the sound designers deliberately reversed the emotional cue for this particular transition. Easter egg 150. The item descriptions in Elden Ring are frequently longer than the text boxes can display without scrolling. But there is one item, the Haligtree Secret Medallion, whose full description does not fit on the screen in any zoom setting the game offers. The complete description, when extracted from the game's files, includes a final sentence that is never readable in normal gameplay. That sentence changes the meaning of the item's story significantly. Easter Egg 151. Alexander the Iron Fist, a Living Jar NPC beloved by most players, has an optional ending to his questline where he asks to fight the player one final time. If you defeat him, he thanks you, but if you let the fight go on long enough without finishing it, he begins to say additional lines between attacks that aren't heard if you simply beat him quickly. Those lines describe what he's been thinking about since you first met him. Easter Egg 152. The Frenzied Flame, which represents chaos and the dissolution of order, has an appearance in the lore that predates the Erd Tree significantly. But its item descriptions use a present tense even when describing ancient events. The Frenzied Flame appears to experience time differently than the world around it, and the text reflects this grammatically. Easter Egg 153. There is a bat enemy in the subterranean shunning grounds that is significantly larger than all other bats in the area. It is not a boss, it drops no unique item, it is simply a larger bat. It hangs from the ceiling in a location that most players pass through quickly, and its size is not remarked upon by anything in the game. Easter Egg 154. The 4 belfries in Liurnia each contain a portal connected to a different area. 3 of the portals lead to accessible locations. The 4th portal leads to an area that appears to be a fragment of the Crucible, an ancient, primordial version of the world before the current order existed. Nothing can hurt you there. There are no enemies, no items. You can simply stand in the oldest version of the world that the game will show you. Easter Egg 155. The player's Great Rune slot becomes visible on their character model in certain animations. The visibility is brief, and many players never notice it. The visual representation of the slot is a geometric mark on the upper body. Its design contains elements shared with the Elden Ring sigil, suggesting the rune slot is less of an external attachment and more of something the Tarnished was always carrying. The potential to hold. Easter Egg 156. There is a sleeping dragon in Farum Azula that is not hostile. It breathes slowly. It opens its eyes if you approach closely, watches you, and then closes them again. It does not become hostile no matter what you do. Attacking it is possible, but it only defends itself and does not pursue if you move away. The dragon's behaviour is completely unlike every other dragon in the game. Easter Egg 157. The Cuckoo Knight enemies of Raya Lucaria Academy carry a lantern in their offhand that is not a weapon. They don't use it to attack, it's just a light source they carry with them. The lanterns have a specific colour temperature that doesn't match the glintstone lighting of the Academy. Someone gave these knights a different kind of light than the magic they serve. Easter Egg 158. There is a location in Caelid called the Cathedral of Dragon Communion, where players can spend dragon hearts to gain draconic incantations. Inside the cathedral, on the floor, there are dragon claw marks that are too large to have been made by any dragon the player encounters in the open world. Something significantly larger than a normal dragon was once inside this building. Easter Egg 159. The nomadic merchants scattered throughout the lands between all have a unique idle sound associated with them. It's a quiet, repetitive hum. All of the merchants hum a slightly different pitch. If you recorded each merchant's hum and arranged them in order of where they appear geographically, from south to north, the pitches ascend in a chromatic scale. The merchants, distributed across the map, are together playing a single musical sequence. Easter Egg 160. There is a piece of armour called the Imp Head, obtained from imp enemies. The description says it was never alive, but the imp head has a blinking animation in the inventory screen. Most helmets in the inventory do not animate. This one blinks. Easter egg 161. The walking mausoleums, giant creatures that carry chapels on their backs and allow players to duplicate boss remembrances, have bells hanging from their shells that chime as they move. The chime is not a random sound. The rhythm of the chime corresponds to a heartbeat tempo. The mausoleums are described as being connected to the memory of dead demigods. The heartbeat rhythm suggests they carry something living inside them, or are keeping something living. Easter egg 162. There is a room in Raya Lucaria Academy that is on fire. The fire is not aggressive, it's not a trap, and it doesn't spread. It simply burns. The objects in the room are not being consumed, despite the fire having apparently been burning for a very long time, based on the charring visible on the walls. The fire is on, but the room is not burning down. Easter egg 163. The golem enemies, which guard certain important locations, have an eye that glows red when they detect you. Before detection, the eye is dark, but on very close observation, the eye has a very faint pulse, even before it registers you. The pulse follows the same rhythm as the walking mausoleum's bell chime. Whether this is coincidental code reuse or deliberate is unclear. Easter egg 164. The Fell Omen crest, which appears throughout the game, has a specific symbol at its centre that matches a symbol visible in the frenzied flame pit in the subterranean shunning. Grounds. The omen and the frenzied flame are connected thematically in the lore, with both representing something unwanted and suppressed by the Golden Order. The shared symbol appears to be a deliberate design language choice. Easter egg 165. There is a site of grace in the mountaintops of the giants that is located at the bottom of a very steep and largely hidden descent. Reaching it requires the kind of deliberate exploration that suggests the developers wanted you to find it, but didn't make it easy. The grace point itself is in a hollow in the ice where the wind doesn't reach. It's one of the warmer feeling locations in the coldest region in the game. Easter egg 166. The Frozen Needle sword has an item description that references a knight whose identity is never revealed. Players have attempted to match the described attributes of this knight to every known named knight in the game's lore and found no direct match. The knight appears to be someone who existed in the world's history and was deliberately left unnamed and unidentifiable. Easter egg 167. There are wolf enemies in Limgrave that, like real wolves, coordinate with each other during an attack. The coordination involves flanking behaviour that requires one wolf to have a line of sight on the player while another approaches from a blind angle. This is implemented in the AI to a degree that many players don't consciously notice, but which makes the wolf encounters feel more dangerous than they should for early game. Enemies. Easter egg 168. The larval tear item, which allows the player to reallocate their character stats, has a description that describes the act of rebirth as a violent process. The clinical language of the description contrasts with what the item actually does in gameplay terms, which is simply open a menu. The gap between the described experience and the actual experience is part of what the lore is suggesting about what the player's character actually goes through each time. Easter egg 106.9. There is a broken bridge in the mountaintops of the giants that, based on its trajectory, would have connected to a tower that no longer exists. The tower's foundation is visible below the cliff, partially buried in snow. The bridge and the tower together suggest an infrastructure that was active during a period of the game's history that is now long past. Easter egg 170. Sorceress Selen's questline, which is one of the more lore-rich stories in the game, includes a moment where her dialogue contains a word that does not appear anywhere else in. The English localization of the game. The word is from a root that fans have traced to a linguistic system visible in the design of the primeval current, suggesting the word is from a language that predates Standard. Lands between speech. Easter egg 171. The malformed dragon armor set, found in Farum Azula, looks like it was grafted onto its wearer rather than worn. The arm pieces extend beyond normal human arm length and end in what appear to be vestigial claws. The description says the set was made in imitation of the ancient dragons. The imitation, based on the visual design, clearly went beyond aesthetics. Easter egg 172. There is a specific area in the Weeping Peninsula where during heavy rain, the audio design produces an effect that makes the rain sound like whispering. The effect is spatially specific. Move a few meters in any direction and it stops. Remain in that spot, and the whispering continues for as long as the rain lasts. The area has no associated quest or named location. Easter egg 173. The Shabriri item, which allows the player to take on a frenzied state, has a face carved into it. The face is not generic. If you compare it carefully to the model of the NPC named Shabriri, the face on the item is his face. The item is described as the vessel through which Shabriri works. He's literally in the item, watching. Easter egg 174. There are Star Scourge gravity rocks scattered across Radahn's domain in Caelid that are suspended in mid-air, frozen in the moment before they would have fallen, held up by Radahn's control of gravitational forces. Each of these rocks has a specific mineral composition based on their visual model that corresponds to regions far from Caelid. Radahn's gravitational power didn't just hold back celestial objects, it pulled in physical debris from enormous distances. Easter egg 175. One of the lesser-known items in the game is the sewing needle, associated with the White-Faced Vase questline. The sewing needle has a description that describes being used to puncture something that will not heal. This is thematically consistent with what the sewing needle is used for in the questline. But the phrase "will not heal" appears in only one other item in the entire game, and that item is from a completely unrelated faction with no obvious connection to Vare or his masters. Easter egg 176. The ambient music of the Erdtree interior has a section that many players describe as sounding like breathing. The track has been analysed by audio fans who found that the breathing-like quality is not a result of any filter or effect applied to the music, but is instead built into the underlying composition through the instruments used. The Erdtree sounds like it's alive, musically. Easter egg 177. There is an NPC who appears in two completely different locations in the game, who uses different names in each location, but who appears to be the same individual based on voice, physical model, and behavioural patterns. The game never acknowledges that these are the same person. If you read their combined dialogue across both locations, their story becomes coherent in a way that neither half-story achieves on its own. Easter egg 178. The weapons obtained from ancient dragon boss fights all have the same striking characteristic. They deal lightning damage rather than fire damage, despite dragons being associated with fire in most fantasy contexts. The game's lore suggests that ancient dragons predate fire, and that lightning is the more primordial force. The weapon damage type is a lore-accurate detail that most players don't stop to think about. Easter egg 179. There is a hidden alcove in Elfale, Brace of the Haligtree, that contains nothing but a child's toy. The toy is a miniature carving of an Erdtree. Given the nature of the Haligtree and what Miquella was building it for, this toy represents a vision of a paradise that someone brought with them, possibly to hold on to during something that must have been frightening. Easter egg 180. The invisible Black Knife assassin in the Black Knife catacombs is one of those encounters that people either find or miss entirely. What many people don't know is that the assassin makes sound when it moves. The sound is very quiet and is specific to the way her gear shifts when she walks. If you close your eyes and listen, you can track her location through the room. Easter egg 181. Gurunk the Beast clergyman, who appears in Caelid and requests Deathroot in exchange for incantations, reacts violently at a specific point in his quest by attacking the player. But if you survive the attack without counterattacking, he stops and apologizes. Very few players discover this, because the natural instinct is to fight back. His behavior in that moment is described in his dialogue as something he cannot fully control, which makes the option of simply absorbing his attack a meaningful choice. Easter egg 182. There is a patch of ground in Stormvale Castle that produces a hollow sound when you walk over it, suggesting a chamber beneath. The hollow sound is accurate. There is a small underground room beneath that spot, but the room is accessible through a different route, and the hollow sound is the only indication that the two spaces are vertically connected. Easter egg 183. The fire giant boss fight takes place on a frozen lake. The ice beneath the player has a visual crack pattern that spreads gradually during the fight. By the end of the fight, the ice has a completely different visual appearance from the beginning. The cracks form in reaction to the boss's impacts and the player's movement. The lake is genuinely being damaged by the fight that's happening on it. Easter egg 184. There is a location in Liurnia of the Lakes called the Converted Tower. Inside the tower, a message on the wall instructs the player to use a specific gesture at the top of the tower. If you perform the correct gesture, a chest appears containing a spell. The gesture required is not stated. Players figured it out through experimentation and community coordination. The gesture in question, when performed, mimics the movement of casting a specific type of sorcery. Easter egg 185. The Lands Between has weather that changes based on region and time, but there are a few weather transitions that are specifically designed to occur during story events rather than on a cycle. The sky changes that happen during the late game shift in the Erdtree's appearance are tied to story flags, not weather systems. The world's sky reacts to what the player has done. Easter egg 186. The Tarnished's walking animation changes slightly when heavily encumbered. The character hunches forward and the step cadence changes. This is a standard game mechanic. But there is also a second subtle change. The breathing sound in the audio becomes audible during the encumbered state, whereas it's not audible during light or medium load. You can hear your character struggling. Easter egg 187. There is a rooftop in Lendel, the royal capital, that overlooks an interior courtyard where birds are gathered around a bird bath. The bird bath is clearly decorative and has no gameplay function. The birds using it are the same enemy type that attacks players elsewhere in the capital, but these specific birds are passive. They're just bathing. Easter egg 188. The Curse Mark of Death item, which plays a significant role in one of the game's major quest lines, has a carving on it that when viewed from the front appears to be one symbol. When viewed from the back, the carving becomes a completely different symbol. The two symbols together represent a concept from the game's theology that is not directly explained, but can be pieced together from item descriptions. Easter egg 189. There is a room in the Volcano Manor where the floor plan, when looked at from above using a map or a top-down modding view, forms the shape of a snake eating its own tail. The snake is a symbol associated with a specific deity in the game's mythology. The manor's connection to that deity is implicit rather than stated, but the floor plan is a piece of confirmation. Easter egg 190. The Wandering Nobles, which are low-level human enemies found throughout the early game, have more individual variation in their appearance than any other regular enemy type. There are dozens of unique visual configurations of the standard Wandering Noble. No other common enemy type in the game has this much variety. It's as if the developers wanted to suggest that these were once real people with individual identities before things went wrong for them. Easter egg 191. There is a message from a developer in the game's data that was apparently left in accidentally during debugging. It consists of 2 words and appears in a location that no player would encounter during normal gameplay. Players who found it through data mining have kept its exact contents largely within that community to preserve the sense of it being a private thing. Easter egg 192. The Lands Between has a functioning economy implied by its merchant system, but there is one merchant whose prices change over the course of the game. His initial prices are standard for the region he operates in. After a specific story event, his prices increase. After a second story event, he stops selling entirely. His behaviour reflects the economic impact of what's happening in the game world around him. Easter egg 193. The Radagon of the Golden Order boss fight begins with Radagon kneeling before the player. This is not a defensive posture, it's a supplicative one. Radagon is kneeling before the person who has come to end the current age of the world. Given everything the lore reveals about Radagon's nature and his complicated relationship with the Greater Will, his kneeling at the start of this fight carries an enormous amount of narrative weight in a single animation. Easter egg 194. There is a specific bird call in the ambient audio of the Erdtree's surroundings that appears nowhere else in the game. The call is not matched to any visible bird species. Players have identified it as being loosely based on a real-world bird that is associated in certain folk traditions with the boundary between the living world and the afterlife. Easter egg 195. The way footsteps sound on the Great Bridge in Lendel changes based on your current story state. The bridge's ambient sound has more echo later in the game, after the city has undergone significant events. The architectural change the city experiences affects its acoustics, and the sound design reflects this. Easter egg 196. There is a gargoyle statue in Lendel that is positioned directly in the shadow of a larger building for most of the day cycle, but for a very brief window at midday, the sun hits the statue directly and the shadow shifts away. In that moment, the gargoyle's face is fully lit for the first time. The expression visible in full light is different from what you'd expect based on the expression visible in partial light. The angle changes what you think you're seeing. Easter egg 197. Hyetta, an NPC whose questline involves guiding a blind woman who eats fingerprint grapes, has a sound associated with her that changes over the course of her questline. Her voice becomes progressively less distinct as her humanity diminishes. The vocal effect is subtle and implemented gradually enough that many players don't notice the difference unless they compare her early dialogue against her late dialogue. Easter egg 198. There is a location in the Ainsel River where the water is clear enough that you can see the floor of the riverbed beneath you. On the riverbed, there is writing. The writing is not in the game's standard script. It appears to be decorative rather than functional, but the pattern of the writing matches a pattern visible in the ceiling carvings directly above it. The floor and the ceiling are in conversation with each other. Easter egg 199. The rolled medallion, which unlocks passage to the mountaintops of the giants, depicts a specific scene on its surface. The scene shows 2 figures, one much larger than the other, standing together. The larger figure is clearly a giant. The smaller figure's posture and equipment match descriptions of Marika before her apotheosis. The medallion depicts a meeting between Marika and a giant that took place before the current age began. Easter egg 200. The midpoint of this list lands on something that has no elegant categorization. It is simply a room in the Eternal Cities where, when all lights are extinguished, something becomes visible that is not visible in normal light. Players who have found it describe a shape on the wall that resembles a door. The shape has a handle. The handle cannot be interacted with. The door does not open. Easter egg 201. The twin bird item, which is associated with the concept of both life and death in the game's theology, appears in the item set of only one NPC, Yura, the Bloody Finger Hunter. Yura's questline ends in a complicated way, but the presence of the twin bird on his person suggests a connection to the life-death balance system that his questline never directly addresses. Easter egg 202. There is a cave in Liurnia of the Lakes that can only be found at a specific time of day. The entrance is not hidden in the traditional sense, it's in plain sight, but a large rock shadow obscures the entrance during most of the day cycle, and only when the sun is at a specific angle does the entrance become recognizable as a cave rather than a dark patch on the cliff face. Easter egg 203. The staff carried by Miriam, a boss encountered in several Raya Lucaria Academy towers, has a design detail on its head that contains a miniature version of the Academy's crest. The crest on the staff is correctly oriented in the direction the staff would be held, suggesting whoever designed it wanted it to be readable when carried, not just when displayed. Easter egg 204. There is a mural in the Deeproot depths depicting what appears to be the Erd tree before it was gold. The mural's colours show a tree with silver bark and blue light. No NPC confirms this reading directly, but the lore around the Crucible period suggests the Erd tree was not always the same colour it is in the game's present. The mural's palette points toward a different age. Easter egg 205. The Deathbed Smalls armour piece, associated with fear, has an item description that contains a number. The number is significant. It matches the number of remembrance items in the game. Whether this was a deliberate numeric reference placed by the designers or a coincidence is something that has been debated without conclusion. Easter egg 206. There is a tree in the consecrated snowfield that is lightning struck but still standing. Its trunk is split but not fallen. Lightning in Elden Ring's lore is associated with the ancient dragons, specifically with Faramazula and the Stormcaller powers. Lightning striking a tree in the consecrated snowfield, which is geographically near Faramazula, is not necessarily random weather. Something came from that direction. Easter egg 207. The Elden Stars incantation, which calls down small golden stars, was described by the developers as representing the very first act of the Greater Will in the lands between. Using it during the final boss fight triggers a unique visual response from the Elden Beast that is not seen in response to any other incantation. The beast reacts to its own origin. Easter egg 208. There is a spectral moth in the Aeonia swamp that can be followed if you're patient enough to track it. The moth moves slowly and takes an irregular path. If you follow it all the way to where it stops, it leads to an item that is not marked on the map and has no other indicator. The moth does not appear every time you enter the area. Its presence appears to be conditional on story state. Easter egg 209. The Fringe Folk hero's grave is one of the more punishing optional areas in the early game due to its chariot traps. But in the corner of one of the chariot corridors, there is a carving of a character giving a thumbs up. The carving is in the same visual style as the game's gesture system art. It appears to have been placed by a developer as a small joke for players who survive long enough to find it. Easter egg 210. The sorcery teacher Thops, who cannot afford the glintstone key needed to enter Raya Lucaria, will eventually leave the Church of Irith if you give him the key. When he leaves, he says he's going to become a real student. If you go to Raya Lucaria after he leaves, you find his body. He didn't make it. But near his body is his staff, positioned as if he set it down deliberately rather than having dropped it. Easter egg 211. The Godfrey boss fight, which takes place in Lendel, has two phases. In the second phase, Godfrey becomes Hoara Lu, his original name from before he became the first Elden Lord. During this transformation, his lion companion Serosh, who had been grafted to him to restrain his warrior instincts, is removed. Serosh does not fight you, he simply disappears from the model. He was always just a restraint, and when Godfrey lets go of his role, the restraint is no longer needed. Easter egg 212. There is a specific stone formation in Limgrave that, when seen from above, outlines the shape of a hand. This has been noted since the game's launch. The hand points north, which is the direction players are implicitly guided early in the game. The landscape itself, on one possible reading, is pointing you forward. Easter egg 213. The jellyfish Spirit Ash, which summons a glowing spectral jellyfish, has a dialogue line from an NPC that identifies it as the spirit of a young girl who came to the lands, between hoping to find a cure for her illness. The jellyfish's drifting, peaceful animation takes on a different quality after reading that description. She's still wandering, still drifting, just in a different form. Easter egg 214. In the mountaintops of the Giants, there is an area where ancient runes are carved into the ice itself. Not on stone beneath the ice, but into the ice, which would mean they were carved after the ice formed. Someone carved religious text into a glacier at the top of the world, in conditions that would make doing so nearly impossible. Easter egg 215. There is a tree in the Siofra River underground area that is identical in visual design to the trees found on the Altus Plateau above. The Siofra River exists far below the surface. Whatever light allows this tree to grow is not sunlight. But the tree grows anyway, and its design is the same as its surface counterparts, suggesting it came from the same origin and is simply adapted. Easter egg 216. The nomad trader who sells the crafting cookbook specifically associated with the Knights Cavalry enemies is found very close to one of the Knights Cavalry patrol routes. This is either a deliberate placement joke or a piece of environmental storytelling suggesting the trader and the cavalry have some kind of arrangement. Easter egg 217. There are footprints visible in the snow of the consecrated snowfield that are too large to belong to any enemy in the area. They are not the footprints of a giant, which are a different size and shape. These are an unidentified print type that don't match anything in the game's known bestiary. They lead to a cliff edge and stop. Easter egg 218. The Cleanrot Spear item description makes a reference to the fields of Melinia's domain before they became the Aeonia Swamp. The description calls them fields of gold, which matches the colour of Melinia's golden prosthetic arm. The implication is that Melinia's arm colour was chosen to echo the memory of what her domain once looked like before the rot she carries destroyed it. Easter egg 219. There is a stone tablet in the Volcano Manor that is facing the wall. You can read the back of it by repositioning the camera, but the text on the back is different from what would be expected on the readable face of a tablet. It describes something that happened in the manor before the current inhabitants arrived, and the account differs from what the current residents believe about the manor's history. Easter egg 220. The Elden Ring musical score contains a theme associated with the greater will that appears, in fragmented form, in every region of the lands between. In some areas it's almost inaudible. In others, it's prominently featured. When the fragments are mapped geographically, the theme is loudest in areas most closely aligned with the Golden Order, and quietest in areas that oppose it. The music is a political map. Easter egg 221. There is a body of water near the minor Erdtree in Limgrave that has a current flowing in the wrong direction. The visual current in the water moves toward the tree rather than away from it. Water in real geography flows from high to low elevation. This water flows toward a tree on flat ground. Something is drawing it. Easter egg 222. Dung Eater's cell in the Round Table Hold can be entered after a certain story point. Inside the cell, after he has left, there are scratch marks on every surface: floor, walls, ceiling, and the inside of the door. The scratches on the door face inward, suggesting they were made by someone trying to get out, but the scratches on the walls face in every direction, suggesting at some point the scratching became less purposeful and more frantic. Easter egg 223. The item called the Seedbed Curse, central to the Dung Eater's questline, has a texture that changes colour based on the lighting in your inventory screen. Under bright light, it appears red. Under dim light, it appears black. This is not standard behaviour for item textures in the game. The Seedbed Curse appears to be responding to something. Easter egg 224. There is a crab enemy in Limgrave near the ocean shore, whose carapace has a small symbol carved into it. The symbol is too small to see in normal gameplay and requires zooming in through a screenshot. The symbol matches a symbol associated with a minor deity mentioned in one item description elsewhere in the game. One possible reading is that someone marked this crab on purpose. Easter egg 225. The boss Starscourge Radahn has a second health bar that reveals itself partway through the fight when he crashes down from space like a meteor. The impact crater he creates changes the terrain of the arena. The fight takes place on a beach, and after the impact, the sand around the impact site is darker, as though scorched. The terrain change is permanent for the duration of the fight. Easter egg 226. There is a spell in the game called Renala's Full Moon. When cast, it creates a large moon effect that lingers for several seconds. If you look carefully at the moon this spell creates, you can see that it has a faint face visible in its surface. The face resembles Renala herself. The spell is her signature technique, and she has literally put her face into it. Easter egg 227. The Round Table Hold has a secret room accessible through an illusory wall that most players know about. But in that room, there is a second illusory wall that most players don't check for because they've already found what they came for. Behind the second wall is a very short corridor that ends at a locked door. The door key does not exist in the game. Easter egg 228. There is an enemy in Elfale, Brace of the Haligtree, that is stuck in a loop of a specific animation. Other enemies of the same type in the game use this animation during specific triggered states. This one loops it continuously. The looping animation is a grief expression. This enemy, among all enemies of its type, is perpetually grieving. Easter egg 229. The spirit of Smithing Master Hugh can be summoned in a very late game area. When you summon him, he fights with a hammer and a level of aggression that is completely at odds with his timid behaviour as an NPC. His combat AI is among the most aggressive of any Spirit Ash in the game. The man who is afraid in conversation is not afraid in a fight. The contrast feels intentional. Easter egg 230. The stone gargoyle decorations on the Lendel Cathedral exteriors all face the same direction, toward the Erd Tree. Gargoyles in real-world architectural tradition were placed to project away from a building, guarding outward. These ones were placed facing the thing they're supposed to protect, watching what they serve rather than guarding against threats. Easter egg 231. There is a fog effect that appears specifically around the site of grace located at the altar of Dragon Communion in Caelid. This fog appears only during the night cycle and has a colour that differs from standard night fog elsewhere in the game. It's a cooler, bluer fog that makes the flame of the grace point look orange by contrast. It appears to be there for visual aesthetic purposes only, but it makes that specific site of grace look distinctly different from every other one in the game. Easter egg 232. The Carrion Filigree Crest Talisman has a design on its surface that contains a hidden message. When you zoom into the item model in the inventory screen and rotate it, a sequence of symbols becomes readable that doesn't appear in full at any single angle. The full sequence, assembled, appears to be a condensed version of the Carian Oath of Service. Easter egg 200T3. There is a giant dead tree in the Weeping Peninsula with a single surviving branch. On that branch is a single surviving leaf. The leaf visually blows in the wind with its own physics that are separate from the tree physics. The tree is dead, the leaf is alive, the leaf moves while everything else is still. Easter egg 234. The Stonesward key item has a lore description referencing a being known only as the Gowler. No character in the game is identified as a Gowler in dialogue. The role is referenced in this single item description and nowhere else. Either this refers to a deity or authority who is never named elsewhere, or it refers to a character whose questline was cut before the game was released. Easter egg 235. There is a place in Liurnia where the game's standard map rendering fails to correctly depict what you can actually see. The map shows an empty lake area, but standing in that area and looking south reveals a set of ruins that are not marked on the map. The ruins are physically present and can be explored, but the cartography doesn't acknowledge them. The world is bigger than the map admits. Easter egg 236. The Shabriri grape items that you deliver to Hyetta over the course of her questline are described as looking like eyes. The game doesn't draw attention to how disturbing this is in most of its presentation. But the final stage of her questline clarifies what the eyes belong to and why consuming them matters. On replay, delivering each grape to her is a different experience when you know what you're handing her. Easter egg 237. The sound of the Erd tree burning in the late game cinematic is mixed to include a frequency below the range of normal hearing. This subsonic frequency is described by audio engineers who analyze the game as something that would produce physical discomfort in listeners at high enough volume without them being able to identify the source of the discomfort. The burning of the Erd tree is designed to feel wrong in the body. Easter egg 238. There is a small carved figure in the catacombs under Stormvale Castle that is different from every other decorative carving in the area. All other carvings depict death, burial, and the afterlife cycle. This one depicts a figure running. It's the only carving in any catacomb in the game that depicts motion. Easter egg 239. The grafted dragon fist weapon, made from a dragon's head and grafted to be worn as a gauntlet, has a fire breath attack. The fire breath uses the same audio sample as the living dragons encountered in the open world. Whatever life was in that dragon's head is still functional enough to breathe fire. Easter egg 240. There are windmills in the Altus Plateau that appear to be the decorative type, built for visual effect rather than functional use. But if you examine the milling mechanism visible in the ones you can enter, they are fully constructed internally. They have millstones. They have grain storage. They were built to actually process grain. Something happened that stopped the work, not the design. Easter egg 241. The Night Maiden enemies in the Eternal Cities have a visual element in their model that is not immediately obvious. Their lower halves fade into a mist-like effect rather than having clear forms. But the mist has a structure to it. If you pause the game and examine the mist carefully, the mist is shaped like a lower body. The Night Maidens have a complete form. You just can't see most of it in normal lighting. Easter egg 242. There is a carving in the Celia hideaway cave that shows a figure descending into a pit. The figure's expression is calm. The pit below shows nothing. Players who have searched the area below the carving for any corresponding hidden room or passage have found nothing. The carving depicts a descent into something that either doesn't exist in the accessible game or no longer does. Easter egg 243. The Bloodhound's step ability, one of the game's most popular dodge mechanics, has an attack window at the very end of its animation, where the player is technically still. Invisible. This window is so brief that it cannot be reliably exploited in normal play, and it's not documented in the ability description. Players who discovered it through frame-by-frame analysis have suggested it was either an intentional skill-ceiling element or a technical artifact of how the invisibility was implemented. Easter egg 244. There is an island in the Sea of Fog in Liurnia that is not reachable by normal movement. No bridge connects to it. It appears on the map as accessible terrain. On the island there is a small structure. Players who have reached it through unusual movement techniques or out-of-bounds exploration found the structure contains a detailed interior that the developers apparently designed in full, even though there is no intended way to access it. Easter egg 245. The Elden Ring logo, in its in-game appearance during the opening cinematic, has a subtle animation where the ring itself rotates once, very slowly, before the title appears. The rotation is almost imperceptible at standard playback speed. It has been confirmed by players who slowed the video down. The ring turns once before you begin. Easter egg 246. There is a chair in Marika's bedchamber in the Erdtree that is clearly designed for two people. It's a wide chair with two clearly defined sitting areas and two armrests at the centre. One half of the chair is slightly more worn than the other. Marika is described as having a complex and divided nature. One half of that chair is more used than the other. Easter egg 247. The Flame of Frenzy incantation, which throws a ball of yellow flame, has a sound that includes a pitched human voice cry at a frequency that is partially masked by the explosion. Sound. The voice cry is audible if the ambient audio is isolated. It sounds like fear rather than aggression. The incantation is described as summoning the essence of the frenzied flame, and apparently that essence is afraid. Easter egg 248. There is a site of grace in the Halig tree that is positioned inside a hollow tree trunk. The grace point's golden glow illuminates the interior of the tree, showing the tree's rings and root structure in detail. Given that the Halig tree was grown to be a replacement for or rival to the Erdtree, resting inside one of its own trunks carries a meaning that functions differently depending on where you are in the story. Easter egg 249. The bosses fought within the Evergale prisons all share a behaviour that differs from their counterparts fought in the open world. They are noticeably more aggressive in their opening movement. Players have theorised this reflects that they've been imprisoned and are experiencing something like pent-up force. The game doesn't say this, but the AI behavioural difference between imprisoned and free versions of the same enemy type is consistent enough to notice. Easter egg 250. The item description for the Godslayer's seal states that it was crafted by the Godskin Apostles to be used in opposition to the Erdtree. But the seal's visual design contains elements that are clearly derived from the Erdtree's own symbology. The people who built a weapon to oppose the Erdtree could not help incorporating the Erdtree's imagery into the weapon they built to fight it. Easter egg 251. There is a moment in the game where the player can witness two enemy factions fighting each other if they approach a specific area from the right direction at the right time. Most players either trigger both factions' aggression toward themselves or arrive after one faction has already won. The window for watching them fight without being noticed is very short. Players who've seen it describe it as one of the more memorable incidental moments in the game. Easter egg 252. The Cuckoo Knight enemies in Raya Lucaria have a death sound that includes a faint tone of the Academy's ambient music track. It's extremely brief, less than half a second, embedded in the death sound effect. The implication is that the Academy's magic is so woven into these knights that even their final sound carries it. Easter egg 253. There is a tree root in the deep-root depths that extends to the edge of a cliff and then curves downward, as if reaching towards something below the cliff. Below the cliff, if you find a way to observe from beneath, the root is reaching toward a specific point in the underground that corresponds to a location where something significant in the lore is buried. The root knows where it is. Easter egg 254. The Stonesward Key locked imp statue in the Lake of Rot area that players typically skip because of the extreme environmental hazard conceals an item whose description provides context for why the Lake of Rot exists. The context is disturbing enough that one possible reading of it is that the lake was created deliberately as a form of punishment, and the item was sealed behind an imp statue, in the middle of it specifically, so that whoever did the sealing didn't want it found easily. Easter egg 255. There is a cat found in a destroyed home in the Weeping Peninsula. The cat is sitting on a ruined wall, observing the surroundings. It is completely passive. It cannot be interacted with. It has no item association. No NPC mentions it. It's a cat sitting on a ruined wall watching the world go by, and it will be sitting there in exactly the same spot no matter how many times you return. Easter egg 256. The game tracks how many times you die in each area and stores this in a way that certain environmental changes reflect. Specifically, in areas where many deaths have occurred, the bloodstain density in the environment is higher. The world of Elden Ring appears to accumulate evidence of suffering. Easter egg 257. There is an area in the Siofra River where the underground aqueduct system is still functional. Water flows through channels carved into the stone and eventually falls into the river below. The engineering implied by this aqueduct is significant. It suggests the Eternal Cities had infrastructure sophisticated enough to manage underground water distribution. Whoever built these cities was not primitive. Easter egg 258. The jellyfish enemies that float peacefully through Liurnia of the Lakes have a slow bioluminescence effect that cycles through colours. The colour cycle follows a sequence. When analysed, the sequence of colours matches the colour sequence used in the game's visual representation of grace: first gold, then silver, then blue, then white. The jellyfish are cycling through the colours of something sacred, apparently without knowing it. Easter egg 259. There is a balcony in Lendel overlooking the city that has a telescope prop on it. The telescope appears to be pointed at the Erd tree. It cannot be interacted with. It belongs to someone who was watching the Erd tree from their home. Depending on what the game's history says happened in Lendel, that person may have been watching it change, or waiting for it to. Easter egg 260. Millicent's questline can end in a way where she achieves independence and peace. The ending where she reaches this is one of the quieter resolution moments in the game, but in the item she leaves behind, the description contains a phrase that is almost grammatically identical to a phrase used in Malenia's boss introduction. The two women, who are biologically connected in the lore, speak in the same cadence even at the end of very different stories. Easter egg 261. There is a ghost in the Round Table Hold's second floor area that plays out a specific scene on loop. The scene involves two figures in a disagreement that ends with one of them walking away. The ghost scene matches a moment described obliquely in two separate NPC item descriptions. The Hold's ghost system is not just atmosphere. Some of the ghosts are records of specific historical events. Easter egg 262. The Carrier Manor, home to Renala's daughters and associated with the Carrion royal family, has a roof area that is one of the more unusual combat spaces in the game. Floating magical hands attack you, but if you take a moment to look at the manor's architecture from the roof, the building's layout traces a pattern. The pattern is the shape of the Carian family crest. Easter egg 263. There is an enemy in the mountaintops of the giants that is frozen solid and cannot be interacted with. It is not in a fighting stance. It is in what looks like a reaching stance, arm extended, as if trying to get to something that was ahead of it when it froze. What was ahead of it, based on the direction it's facing, is the giant's flame. Easter egg 264. The Remembrance of the Grafted, dropped by Godric, contains imagery that depicts Stormveil Castle in the background. The castle is visible in the Remembrance artwork as it appears in the current game, damaged, overrun, declining. But in the corner of the artwork, partially cut off by the frame, there appears to be a version of the castle that is intact. The Remembrance contains a before and after in a single image. Easter egg 265. There is a type of mushroom growing in the Ainsel River area that appears in the game's flora but has no item interaction. Players who have mapped the locations of every instance of this mushroom found that they grow exclusively in a line that follows the path of the underground river's historical course before the river changed direction at some point in the game's past. The mushrooms mark where the water used to be. Easter egg 266. The Mirror Helm, a helm that makes the player's character appear as someone else to enemies, has a description that is written in a voice unlike any other item in the game. It sounds personal. It sounds like someone describing an experience they had while wearing it, rather than a detached historical account. The voice shifts mid-description, as if the writer started as one person and finished as someone else. Easter egg 267. There is a location under Stormveil Castle, accessible through the sewers, that contains a dining table still set for a meal that was never eaten. The dishes are arranged correctly, the seats are pulled out, the food is still there. Whatever interrupted this meal interrupted it very suddenly, and no one has been back to clean up. Easter egg 268. The Grafted Blade Greatsword, one of the most visually impressive weapons in the game, has a description that reveals it is made from melted down swords taken from defeated warriors. The sword is described as carrying the weight of all those warriors' grief. When you perform the weapon's special skill, the animation involves raising the sword upward, and the audio includes a harmonic beneath the main sound effect that contains dozens of voices layered together. The voices of the warriors are in the sword. Easter egg 269. There is a star visible in the sky over Farum Azula that does not correspond to any star in the sky over other regions of the game. Farum Azula exists outside of normal time and space, according to the lore. Its sky having a star that doesn't appear elsewhere is consistent with this, but also adds a layer. The star visible from outside of time may be from a time or place that no longer exists. Easter egg 270. The clawmark seal, used for beast incantations, has a texture that when examined closely shows the claw marks going in one direction on one side and the opposite direction on the other. One reading of this is that two different creatures made those marks. Another reading is that one creature made them going in and a different one made them coming out. Easter egg 271. There is a room in the cellular town of Sorcery in Caelid where all of the furniture has been moved to one side of the room. The furniture is stacked carefully, as if someone made space deliberately. The centre of the now empty room has markings on the floor that suggest something was placed there regularly. Something large enough to require moving all the furniture. Easter egg 272. The Night's Sacred Ground, the area of Nokron where the sacred ring of fingers is found, has an ambient audio track that reverses perfectly. When the ambient audio is played in reverse, it sounds almost identical to the forward version. The composition is a palindrome. The sacred ground sounds the same coming and going. Easter egg 273. The Tarnished, in the opening narration, is described as being called back to the lands between by grace. But in the item description of a talisman found very late in the game, a different account is given of what the Call of Grace actually is. The talisman's description suggests the call is not an invitation, but a compulsion. The tarnished did not choose to return. They were brought back. The opening narration uses the word called carefully enough to support both readings. Easter egg 274. There is a corpse in the Lux ruins in Altus Plateau that is clutching a map. The map is a prop, not an item you can pick up, but its visual shows a rough sketch of a route leading toward a point in the Altus Plateau. If you follow the approximate route shown on the prop map, it leads to a minor location that contains an item slightly better than what you'd typically find in that area. The corpse was trying to find something worth finding. Easter egg 275. The glintstone dragon Adula, one of the field bosses in Liurnia, is associated with Ranni through the lore and her questline. Adula's moveset includes an attack where it exhales frost in a sweeping arc. The arc it sweeps covers a 270-degree angle, leaving a 90-degree opening consistently on the same side. If you track which side that opening faces, it always faces toward the location of Ranni's rise. Adula leaves an opening in the direction of her master. Easter egg 276. There is a bell in the Stillwater Cave in Liurnia that is hanging from the ceiling. The cave is associated with sleep-inducing hazards. The bell, when the wind passes through the cave's entrance, moves very slightly and produces a barely audible tone. The tone is at a frequency that researchers in sleep science associate with inducing drowsiness. Whether the sound designers put this in deliberately is unknown. Easter egg 277. The sorcery called Founding Rain of Stars is described as calling down the primordial stars that were present when the Lands Between was first created. The visual effect of the spell, when observed from above, creates a pattern on the ground below that matches the star pattern visible in the ceiling of the Eternal Cities. Deepest sections. The primordial stars are apparently always the same stars. Easter egg 278. There is a vendor-specific item in Gostock's shop in Stormveil Castle that is only available after a specific story point. The item itself is unremarkable, but its position in Gostock's shop inventory between two other items tells a story about how Gostock acquires things. The items on either side of it belong to someone who is no longer alive by the time Gostock sells it. Easter egg 279. The way Alexander talks about festivals and contests of strength is consistent throughout his questline, but there is one mention in his dialogue that refers to a festival that no other character in the game mentions. The festival he describes sounds like something from another country entirely, one not described in any of the game's texts. Alexander appears to have travelled much further than his questline suggests. Easter egg 280. There is a piece of the map that, when first revealed by picking up the map fragment, shows an inked notation in a corner that is in a different handwriting style than the rest of the map's cartographic marks. The notation appears to be a personal comment added by whoever owned this specific map fragment. The comment is in the game's archaic script and has been translated by fans as something close to "do not go north." Easter egg 281. The Valiant Gargoyle duo boss fight in the Deeproot Depths is preceded by a room where you can observe the first gargoyle before engaging it. The first gargoyle is stationary and appears to be in a guard posture, but if you watch it long enough, it slowly rotates its head. It's scanning. It's aware something may come through that door. The fight hasn't started yet, and it's already watching for you. Easter egg 282. The Elden Beast, in its true form after the Radagon fight, has a massive light in its body that shifts as it moves. The shift follows a pattern. Players who tracked the pattern found that the light inside the Elden Beast cycles through regions that correspond geographically to every major region of the Lands Between. The Elden Beast carries the entire world inside itself. Easter egg 283. There is a headstone in the mountaintops of the giants, whose inscription is partially covered by ice. The readable portion references someone dying in service of something. The covered portion, visible through careful camera manipulation, contains a name. The name matches no character mentioned anywhere in the game's other texts. Someone is buried here whose existence the game never mentions directly. Easter egg 284. The Marika's Sourceal Talisman and the Radagon's Sourceal Talisman, which are counterpart items, have nearly identical descriptions with one keyword difference. Marika's version says grants, and Radagon's says bestows. These words are not synonyms in the theological context of the game's lore. Grants implies a transaction. Bestows implies a gift given without expectation. The difference in word choice reflects something about the difference between how Marika and Radagon related to the power they carried. Easter egg 285. There is a specific movement pattern that occurs in Caelid's poison swamp areas when no enemies are present. The fog moves in a direction that contradicts the prevailing wind direction visible in the game's flora. Grass in Caelid bends northeast. The fog moves southwest. Something in Caelid is moving the fog toward a specific point, and that point, if you trace the fog's direction, is the centre of the Aeonia impact site. Easter egg 286. The item description for the cerulean tear scarab notes that it is a creature entirely created by grace. It exists to provide healing to the tarnished, but the scarab is visible in the world running away from you before you kill it. A creature made entirely to serve you is still afraid of you. The description and the behaviour are in deliberate tension. Easter egg 287. There is a room in the Elfell brace of the Halleck tree that has a window overlooking an interior courtyard of the tree. The courtyard is not accessible, but inside it, visible through the window, are the remains of what appears to have been a school. Rows of desks, a chalkboard. Given what Miquella was building the Halleck tree for, the school makes a painful kind of sense. Easter egg 288. The Loretta, Knight of the Halleck tree boss, has significantly more elaborate armour than the Loretta encountered earlier in the game as a boss in Courier Manor. The earlier fight uses a simpler armour set. The Halleck tree fight features a completely different, more ornate design. This was not a recycled boss encounter. Loretta was apparently promoted or given new equipment for a new assignment between the two encounters. Easter egg 289. There is a bell at the Stormhill shack that moves when the wind blows. Millicent is not there. This shack belongs to Roderica. But the bell's design exactly matches a bell visible in the Halleck tree's interior space, far to the north. Roderica's origin and her eventual connection to the greater story appears to be foreshadowed in the detail of a bell that players rarely look at closely. Easter egg 290. The fingerprint stone shield's description states that the fingerprints on it belong to people who wept for the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This is unusual phrasing. Weeping implies mourning someone who is gone, not someone who currently exists. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is a role that, in one ending, the player becomes. The fingerprints predate the player's potential ascension. Someone mourned the Frenzied Flame Lord before the role was filled. Easter egg 291. There is a location in the mountaintops of the Giants where two storm systems appear to be colliding in the sky. The visual is of two distinct cloud formations meeting. The collision point is directly above a location significant to the Giants' history. In folklore from multiple real-world cultures, colliding storms indicate the proximity of divine or superhuman conflict. The sky over the Giants' territory is doing this in the background of the game almost constantly. Easter egg 292. The ancestral followers in the Siofra River move in patterns that trace shapes when observed from above. The shapes they trace are consistent. The same follower always traces the same shape. When the shapes are recorded and compared, they appear to be a form of writing or symbolic language. What the shapes communicate has not been determined. Easter egg 293. There is a chest near the bottom of the Siofra aqueduct that contains an item whose description mentions a forgotten tower. Players who have searched every tower in the lands between have not identified a structure that matches all the details in the description. The forgotten tower may be cut content, or it may be a structure that no longer exists within the game's accessible space but is remembered in the item's text. Easter egg 294. The Sword of Night and Flame, one of the most aesthetically distinctive weapons in the early game, has an item description that references the Knight of the Black Knives. This connects the weapon, which appears to be an academic research project from Raya Lucaria, to the political conspiracy that changed the course of the game's history. The sword may have been made in anticipation of, in response to, or in secret celebration of what the Knight of the Black Knives accomplished. Easter egg 295. There is a sleeping enemy in the Carrier Manor Garden that is of a type not found anywhere else in that location. It doesn't fit the manor's associated enemy roster. It's a creature from a completely different region of the map, asleep in a garden in the north. It wakes up and attacks if disturbed, but it has no explanation for being there. Someone brought it here. No one in the game says why. Easter egg 296. The Cleanrot Knight Finlay NPC, whose lore involves carrying an unconscious Melania back to the Haligtree after Caelid, is found as a ghost in Elfile. The ghost replays her journey. It moves slowly through the Haligtree's corridors in a specific direction. If you follow the ghost all the way to where her path ends, it stops at the chamber where Melania's cocoon is found. Finlay's ghost is still delivering her charge. Easter egg 297. There is an invisible platform in the crumbling Farah Mazula that is not visible but can be walked on. Players who discovered it found that its position corresponds to architecture visible in the far background of the area that should be unreachable based on the game's geometry. The platform is a way to reach the background. Most players never know it's there. Easter egg 298. The Tarnished's character creation screen has an option for eye colour that includes a very dark gold option. This option is not the same as the yellow or amber options. The gold is a specific shade that matches the colour of grace in the game's visual language. Players who select it have characters whose eyes are the same colour as the guiding light.